Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming along this lunchtime to find out more about safety net policy. I'm Riya, Gadhavi, your Vice President for Health Education, Medicine and Social Care faculty. I'm happy to be joined by three senior colleagues from ARU. We have Aletta Norval, who is the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Education. We have Paul Baxter, who is the Academic Registrar. We are also joined by Libby Homer, who is the Director of Student and Library Services. Thank you all for joining us today. We will begin with a short 15-minute presentation of the safety net policy. After the presentation, the panel will be available to answer any questions you have about the policy. If you'd like to submit a question, please head to the box in the top right corner and submit your questions there. We also have subtitles available, which are available by clicking on the button that is on the top right as well. So I'd hand it over to you, Aletta. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Riya and colleagues and students. I'm delighted to be able to be here this afternoon with you to discuss our safety net policy. And I just want to start by saying a little bit about how we came to this policy. So I want to reassure you that as a university, we take the impact of the pandemic on all of our students extremely seriously. And we've worked very hard with the Students' Union in order to produce a policy that we hope is fit for purpose. It contains three broad different strands. The first contains all of the work that we've done around student well-being and student finance, so it's financial support for all of our students, and that offer has very significantly been enhanced in the last few weeks. Secondly, there's a whole strand of work which continues from the work we did last trimester and indeed since March last year, in which we continue to review our submission deadlines and the way in which we treat exceptional circumstances requests, and then a really new addition to the safety net policy, which is around fair assessment. So I'm going to shortly hand over to my colleagues, Paul Baxter and Libby Homer, to talk you through some of the details of those aspects. But what I want to say is that we understand that the pandemic has had a very significant impact on all of our students and our staff, of course, and that the impact varies for people. So we've also tried to, so some aspects of the policies are applied across the piece and others are specific so that students can apply to make use of them should they need to do so. But I'm hoping that you are finding that the support that we are providing for you is very, very extensive indeed. So can I please hand over to Paul? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Aletta. Good afternoon, everyone. As Aletta said, it's good to be with you and looking forward to some of your questions, challenging or otherwise, that we will get this afternoon to make sure that we can explain the policy to you and you can see how it's going to work. Can I have the next slide, please? So this slide just sort of summarises what Aletta has just said to you in terms of what the policy is meant to do overall, and it's part of our approach that we recognise that the pandemic continues to impact on people. But we're also trying to build into the policy that it is difficult to have a one size fits all. So the policy is designed, as we will go through it, you can see, to try and reflect that some people will have different impacts on them as a result of the pandemic, and we've tried to build that into the policy. And hopefully by the end of the academic year, we will have done all we can to minimise any impact on your education. Can we go to the next slide, please? So as Aletta said, there are 4 strands, and the first one, strand 1, I'm going to hand over to Libby.
Thanks, Paul. And hi, everyone, and welcome to this session. It's really good to be here today. I'm Libby Homer, and I'm Director of Student and Library Services. And I'm just going to talk briefly about the financial support that we can offer you during this period. We've launched 2 support funds, and you can find the details of those on the My Anglia, but also through Student News blog, around supporting you if you're in any kind of hardship and require financial support due to COVID. So, for example, you might have lost your job, you may be in a situation where you're needing to pay rent, but not actually present at the place that you're paying rent, and we can support you with that. And also for IT costs as well, so laptop costs and data costs. You can apply for both the funds. There's different eligibility. We've made them as easy as possible to apply to, and so we have a COVID-19 financial support fund, so that would cover, like I say, accommodation costs, employability, related issues, and technical costs as well, such as laptops and data. And then we have a Ruskin support fund as well for those students who are facing additional challenges. All the information is available on our site, so please do take a look, and I encourage you to apply as soon as possible. These are time limited funds, so we need to kind of have applications as soon as possible, and they will close at the end of the month. So please do take a look at that criteria, and if you need financial help, we're there to help you. Just in terms of health and well-being, we recognise that this has been a totally unprecedented time in terms of people's health and well-being, and people are really, really struggling. So there is support available at the university. It's University Mental Health Day today as well, so there's lots of stuff going on in social media and activities this week that has been run by the SU, but also other student societies. So that's great to see lots of people involved and engaging in that. But we can offer you counselling and well-being. We have online support services, online platforms, and that's available digitally at the moment, but we can offer counselling appointments and all sorts of different help for you if you find yourself in a situation where you do require extra help and support. So please do contact us, and I'm happy to take any questions during the Q&A part of this session. So I'll pass back over to Paul.
Thanks, Libby. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So I'm going to talk to you about the remaining aspects of the safety net policy, and the first one I'm going to start with the second strand, which is about submission deadlines. And there are 3 aspects to this particular strand. We have already, as part of this policy, applied a further 6 working days to all the submission deadlines for summative assessment tasks that will occur in trimesters 2 and 3. And summative assessment tasks means that those that count towards your eventual module outcome. Those 6 days will allow you some additional time, allow every student some additional time to focus on their work. There are some minor exceptions where the +6 days will not have been given because of the nature of the assessment task. So, for example, if something needs to be completed after a task that is in a laboratory, i.e. the assessment task is linked to the actual activity you've done on a particular day in a laboratory, there will be some additional time, but it will be proportionate to that task, and it will be linked to that type of work. But for the majority of assessment tasks where submission is required, an extra 6 days has been added for all tasks for all students. Then we move on to the aspect I said earlier on about recognising that there will be different impacts on different people. So whilst that has applied, the +6 days is applied to everybody, individual students now, if they require more time because of what's happening with the pandemic, can request, as normally, a further 10 working days extension. So that's on top of the +6 additional days we gave as the first part of this strand. And then we have also exceptionally allowed students to request a further 5 days extension if they find at the end of the 10 days that they still require some more time. So in total, from the original published deadlines, a student could potentially have a further 21 working days for a piece of work. And we've decided to do it in those 3 steps rather than just a block of 21 to recognise that some students will need all 21, others will not need that, they will need shorter time, and that's why we put it into those 3 stages, so individual students can request the extra time if they need to do so. Can we move on to the next slide, please? The third strand is the one that we have recently publicised and agreed, and you'll understand we've taken some time. We've done it as quickly as possible, but we've also made sure we've taken the time to think about what we're going to introduce to make sure that it is fair, and of course that it doesn't inadvertently do anything to the integrity or quality of your qualification at the end of the day. And we were really concerned about how we could ensure that you were assessed fairly, and that we could make sure the outcomes of your assessments were fair, both it felt fair to you, and of course that we could ensure that marks were applied fairly to everyone based on their performance. So this year we're going to introduce a system called scaling. Scaling is used in other settings, for example, perhaps at A levels, GCSEs, those types of things. But scaling is where we intervene to ensure there's fair assessment by comparing performance with previous performance of the same module in this context, and therefore judging whether we feel there has been a demonstrable effect and decline in performance. So what we're going to do at the end of trimester 2 and trimester 3, when we go through the marking process, once the normal marking process has been completed, we've marked against the published criteria, and our external examiners have completed their moderation, and that's when senior academics from other universities in the UK look at our marking and assure us that it's in line with their own experience at institutions throughout the UK on similar courses. Once we've completed that, we will then look at the mean mark for that module delivery and compare it to an historic mean performance for the same module from previous deliveries. And we will go back at most to three deliveries of the module. And once we have compared those two, if the mean performance of the module in trimester 2 or trimester 3 this year is lower than the mean performance historically, then we will scale up. And what we mean by that is we will add and adjust marks so that the performance this year is equal to the mean performance historically. So that's what we mean by scaling, that we will compare the average, the mean performance this year with what it's been historically, and if those marks need to be adjusted so that the mean performance this year is equal to the mean performance historically, we will adjust the marks accordingly. It will only go in one direction. We won't adjust marks downwards, we will only adjust marks upwards to the mean performance historically. There may well be some professional bodies for whom we have to agree exceptions. We are currently in discussion with professional bodies for those courses that are accredited to ensure that those professional bodies are satisfied and happy with what we're doing, because we don't want to risk accreditation, which you'll understand. And of course, if those discussions with individual professional bodies lead to any difference or difference in approach, then of course we will discuss that with those students and let them know what's happening. We don't anticipate that's going to be an issue. It is a standard thing you would expect us to do to keep our professional bodies up to date with what we are doing. So that's the fair assessment strand that will take place in trimester 2 and trimester 3. Can we have the next slide, please? And finally, and again, Aletta referred to this in her introduction, we have our exceptional circumstances or our mitigation process. As always, here we are extending what we have done previously since this time last year. We have suspended the need for students to submit documentary evidence, e.g. a doctor's certificate, in support of their claim. We are going to continue to be more accommodating to claims related to IT in terms of access to IT resources or failure of IT resources. But the additional thing we've introduced this year is to allow more time for students to submit an exceptional circumstances claim. So normally it's +5 working days after the deadline or the examination, but now it will be 10 working days, an extra 2 weeks for you to get your claim in. So that's the final part of the fourth strand, and together all four of those strands are the safety net policy which we're introducing this year to help us address the needs of our students as the pandemic continues, but hopefully, of course, we'll start to get a better standard of life as things move on. But at the moment in trimesters 2 and 3, this is what we intend to do. So I'll hand back now to Aletta in case she wants to say any final words before we go into the question and answer session.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'm happy for us to go straight into questions and answers. I think that's the best use of our time to give our students a chance to raise their concerns, and I think there's a whole list of questions already available. Thank you.
Thank you, Aletta, Paul, and Libby, for this presentation. There have been many questions in the box, but we'll start with the first one, which says, will the new part of the policy be applied to dissertations, specifically the part about looking at average past module marks and comparing our marks and uplifting them if needed?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. It applies to all modules, and that includes major project modules, dissertations, yes.
Thank you, Paul. Moving on to the next question. What happens if the module is brand new for this academic year?
Okay, I'll carry on with that one. The policy does talk about there will be occasions when modules are new. So what we will do then is when we mark our modules and we organise our modules, they are all collated together into groups which are linked by the discipline, the subject area that those modules cover. So we will look at the average performance of modules from the same course or similar courses in the same subject area, the same discipline, and there'll be an average mean performance for those collection of modules, and therefore we will compare the new module to that figure because there isn't an historic one for the precise module, so we will link it to a group of modules that are related by subject.
Thank you very much, Paul. The next question is a bit of a clarification from the student. It says, just to understand it more, as an example, if I get 60% in the company law this semester and the last 3-year average is 70%, does that mean my grade will be pulled up by 65%?
Thanks, Riya. It's important to highlight that we are comparing the mean mark for the module with the mean mark historically. So if the mean mark for all the students on that module was lower than the mean mark previously, then we will increase it. So we're not looking at individual performance, we're looking at the mean performance of the entire module. So in the particular example you gave, if the student got a mark of 60%, and the mean from the historic performance was 70%, that's not the two figures we compare. We will compare the mean performance of all students on that module. So if the mean performance for all students on the module was 67% and the mean performance historically was 70%, there would be a +3 difference for us to make up, and it would be that difference we make, but it's module to module, it's not student to module. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I hope that answers the question. Next question is, will we be able to see the previous averages before we get our results?
That's a question I'd have to say I will let you know, because at present there's an awful amount of work we're having to go through now to prepare to work out what the historic mean performance is. And I'm also currently exploring with colleagues who look after our IT systems to how we can best present on eVision what we have done. So we're looking at a range of range of options that will indicate to students where a module has been scaled up and what the difference has been, etc., and to confirm, so you can see on eVision that has happened. So once I've got more detail on that and exactly how it will work, I'll share it with the SU and others, and then we can publish it. So I suppose at the moment I'm saying that's work in progress. Once we've agreed the policy to how we're going to implement it, I can't give a more detailed answer to that at the moment.
Thank you, Paul. We look forward to having that being cleared. The next question is, does this impact the grades that we've already received from trimester 1?
No, we won't be changing any grades from trimester 1, although it is important to mention that there will be some modules that are across the year that are delivered through trimester 1 and trimester 2. So those modules, because they conclude in trimester 2, will be part of the scaling policy. But no, we will not be applying this to modules in trimester 1. We won't be making any changes to those.
The next question is, if we applied for extension period for submission, how about the marks that has been provided? Sure.
Could you repeat that for me, Riya? I didn't really catch what that question was, sorry.
It says, if we applied extension period for submission, how about the marks that has been provided?
Okay, I'm not entirely sure what that's getting at, but I'll try and answer it and see if this is where we're going. If the questioner is asking if I get an extension, does the policy still apply to me? Yes, it does. So the extension will allow students more time to work on their assessment task and submit it. And we would still, once the marking process has been concluded, apply scaling to it if indeed that's what the outcome of the process is, that the module should be scaled up. So having an extension is not an either or. It's not if I have an extension, do I not get scaled, or if that makes sense. No, scaling will occur whether or not an extension has been secured and used.
Thank you, Paul. Next question is, I've heard that the safety net is going to consist of the past average of students in a specific or similar module. Why is this, may I ask? It would make sense to have this implemented for first years without any previous mark, but it seems somewhat unfair for second and third year students to get someone else's average instead of their own. Surely that would provide a fair representation of their capabilities if they were to get an average mark of their own.
Okay, thank you. Well, the principle behind the safety net policy is that we are comparing performance that is pre-pandemic and at the same academic level. So we need to check level 6 modules with level 6 modules, level 5 with level 5, etc. And we're now at a stage where the pandemic's been going on for a year, that we do not have evidence of performance at an individual student basis at the same academic level that is pre the pandemic. Therefore, what we've decided to do was use the best way we can evidence performance in that area, and to give us some indication whether there has been a drop in performance. So the best way to do that was look at the equivalent modules in the 3 periods that were most recent before the pandemic. And by that I mean we wouldn't use anything from trimester 2 of last year onwards. It would be trimester 1 of last year, and before that if we need to go further back. So that's why we've done that, because it's the best way to ensure we have a good evidence base against which to make judgments, because we wanted to ensure that we were looking at pre-pandemic performance. A lot of P's there, but that's what we were trying to do, and that was the principle behind the policy. I'll add some more P's to it. The principle behind the policy was pre-pandemic performance. There we go. So that's the reasoning.
Well, thank you for that, Paul. So next question is, what will be done about first semester when our marks have already been given to us under the same circumstances?
Okay, well, the safety net policy doesn't apply to trimester 1, as the safety net policy is designed to deal with the fact that we went into another national lockdown after the conclusion of trimester 1. So trimester 1 teaching as planned, be it online or a mixture of on-campus, online, etc., took place during trimester 1, and the main submission deadline for trimester 1 modules was the 18th of December, and therefore was ahead of the introduction of measures to go into the new national lockdown from January. It was also ahead of the time of the Prime Minister's announcement on the 19th of December about restricting some activities over Christmas. So because trimester 1 had gone ahead as we had planned, but there were still processes in relating to extensions and exceptional circumstances and hardship funds, etc. That's why the safety net policy from the fair assessment side of things does not apply to trimester 1. So as I said earlier on, there will be no changes to trimester 1 marks as a result of this policy.
Thanks, Paul. The next question is, I applied for hardship support but received none. When I asked, I received answer that I'm not receiving maintenance allowance, therefore I'm not entitled to receive any fund. I have been struggling with finance. I think, Libby, you should.
Thanks, Riya. I'll give Paul a bit of a break. So thank you for the question, Florence. The new hardship funds that we've set up are open to a wider cohort of students. So I'd really recommend you having a look at those. You may need to show, though, that you have a shortfall in your account, so in your bank account, and that's part of the application process. But we're not looking at maintenance loans and those sorts of things as part of the hardship applications and these new COVID-19 support funds that we've set up. So I'm just going to post you a link in the chat where you've posted the questions to the page on My Anglia for the support fund that you can that I think you can apply for. But please do get in touch with us because we can talk through your options as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Libby. The next question is, my course, primary education, has only been running for 3 years in total. Last year's results were from the no detriment policy. So technically there's just 1 year of results to determine an average mean. How will this work?
Yep, so where there is historic performance, although it may be only over a couple of years, there are, of course, 2 and sometimes, and I think in education areas, 3 trimesters each year. So we do have a selection of different modules to look at. And as I said, where there is no or very limited historic performance, we will also look at the relation to the subject-related modules, the collection of modules we have too. So that is what we will do in those circumstances.
Thank you, Paul. Next question is, it says, is the additional 6 days applicable to all assignments or dissertations, even those who have applied for and received a 14 days extension?
Yeah, the +6 additional days is separate from the 2 extensions. So the +6 additional days means we have amended all deadlines by +6, save the caveat I mentioned earlier on in some laboratory case exercises, but the +6 has been applied to everybody. It's then on an individual basis where the student seeks a +10 working days and then a further +5 working days, and that's, as I said, on an individual basis. So the again, there is no relationship between the 3. It's not if you've had one you can't have the other, and it's also not the case that the +10 working days will absorb the +6 already. It is in addition to, it is not including those +6 days. I think that was the gist of the question, so hopefully that helps.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the next question, it says, the degree classification for BSc Adult Nursing has changed from September 2018, a cohort where module 5 and 6 is no longer fine graded 50-50 between practice and theory, as it was for all previous years. Therefore, 100% of the theory marks only for module 5 and 6 will count towards the degree classification. How then is the mean going to be calculated from previous years to influence this year's mark? As you can appreciate, the theory marks from previous years could be significantly low due to practice marks bumping it up.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I do understand. I know what that's about. So that's fine. They call me Paul the pedantic, so I'll just be careful. We haven't changed the degree algorithm, the algorithm we use to classify the degree outcome. That hasn't changed. What I think what our question is referring to is that the way we assess some modules in the nursing courses has changed to fit in with national expectations and requirements about how placement and practice assessment is assessed. And the questioner is right in that that has changed, and therefore we will appropriately and accordingly adjust the way we calculate the mean performance historically, so that the two do match the current approach to marking. It's quite technical, it's quite detailed. I'm happy to go into detail without after this event, otherwise we could be here for quite a long time, but we have thought about that, and we will adjust the mean calculation accordingly to make sure that there is a fair comparison between what's happening this year and what our historic data shows us. So be reassured, we have taken into account, and that is planned to be factored in.
Thank you, Paul. Next question is, so if I get 55%, but previous average is 60%, I will get 60%, or will I only get 55? The whole cohort average is 65% this year.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll say again, yes, it is. It's the entire average that is compared, the entire cohort average that is for the module that is compared with the historic module performance. So we don't look at the individual student performance. So there could be a range of marks that individual students on the module get, and if the mean mark is below the historic mean mark, then we will adjust by the appropriate amount every single student's mark by the appropriate amount, but it will be based on the mean performance of the module, not the individual performance of the student.
Thank you, Paul. Next question is, can students apply for the 10-day extension without providing reason for applying it? As usually we have to provide reasons. So in this case, can we apply with no questions asked?
We have said that we will be more accommodating of reasons for extensions. We would, and by that we mean that we are probably, well, we will be less inclined to maybe ask for evidence to support it or whatever. We would still want to have to know the reason, and that's for a number of reasons as well, for us to help us administer it, and so we have some idea and can work out how we can better respond in the future. But we would want to have a reason, absolutely, for why extensions are being requested. What we are saying is we are likely to be far more, or we will be far more accommodating in granting those extensions, and we will not follow up as much as might normally be the case if we were seeking evidence to support that. That's what we mean by being more relaxed with the extension requests.
Thank you very much, Paul. The next question is, it's quite a long one. It says, I understand that the new policy is implemented to cover the negative impact on student performances, although the new policy approach is a more general approach rather than the previous individual approach policy. In which kind of way will this new policy cover the individuals who might have experienced technical issues, family issues, mental issues, and others? In addition, the quality of teaching and communication is not on the same level as face-to-face teaching. As a result, a student might receive lower marks as he or she supposed to receive in normal circumstances. Please explain how the new policy will assess the individual rather than a whole group of students.
Okay, okay. So the new policy is looking, as we said, at performance across cohorts compared to historically, and that's why the safety net policy has 4 different strands. It's a mixture of different things. So I think, as Aletta said right at the beginning, and I also reiterated later on, it's very difficult to have a one-size-fits-all, and because the pandemic will impact on people differently, and that's why there are these different strands. And therefore, if there are particular circumstances that a student feels have affected them, that is why we've also got the extension side of things and the exceptional circumstances side of things for students to use for them to report what's happened, and therefore for us to assist them in either providing more time or to grant exceptional circumstances to allow the assessment to be completed at a later stage. So that's why the safety net policy is a collection of things, so that we can take into account the varying degrees to which the pandemic impacts on students. The generic approach we have taken is the +6 additional working days and the fair assessment approach, where we compare means. Then you have the hardship funds and the exceptional circumstances and the different extensions that allow us to look into things at a more individual level. I don't know if Libby wants to add anything further to that from Strand 1's perspective.
Yes, I will do, Paul, if that's okay. I mean, we do assess applications for extensions individually. That's why it does take us a long time to go through things. And so if you do have individual circumstances that you feel make a case for you and support your case, then we will help you and advise you in terms of putting those forward to course leaders. And so please do, get in touch with us if you don't think that what we have available is necessarily suitable for your circumstances, and we can advise you in terms of what route would be best to go down if you feel that you need that support. Further to that, as I kind of mentioned earlier, if you are in a position where you feel that you need help and additional support for your well-being, then again, please do get in touch with us. And as part of student services, we've got counsel and wellbeing services, and we have online programs as well as face-to-face provisions in terms of supporting those students who just need that extra bit of support as well at this time particularly. Thank you.
Thank you, Libby and Paul. So the next question, I think, is just an extension of that. Will we be understood for trying hard and doing our best at our work, including tests and assignments?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. Obviously, that's what we want students to continue to do, and we encourage students to continue to engage. And of course, as always, try their best with all the assessment tasks they've been given. I mentioned at the beginning the technical word of summative assessment, and that's us just highlighting that the policy itself covers those assessment tasks which contribute to your final module mark. Of course, there will be what's called formative assessment tasks, which are those that you're given during your module, which, although they don't count to the eventual task, they're there to help you to build up confidence, to help you improve and enhance what you're doing. They're not subject to the policy because they don't count. But again, obviously trying with those and engaging with those will, by definition, assist with your eventual performance. So that's how it fits in with the safety net policy. Aletta, I don't know if you want to add something to that approach.
Yes, if I may just say that it's very clear to us that that everything we do is we're doing in good faith here. We are assuming absolutely that everybody is working as hard as they can and doing their utmost to have the best possible performance that they can have under the circumstances. And that is why we've introduced these additional safety net policies, to really recognise that fact. So I think we're absolutely clear. Thank you, Ralph, for asking this question, that we are assuming everybody is working as hard as they possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Aletta and Paul. That's reassuring for the students. Next question is, will we be informed if our marks change due to scaling?
Thank you. That's a good question. And yes, we will show on the student eVision record when a mark has been adjusted for scaling. Precisely how we're going to show that, our discussions I'm currently having with colleagues who look after our IT systems about how we're going to present that. But students will be made clear to students how the scaling has occurred and where it has occurred. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the next question. Wouldn't it make more sense to apply a no detriment policy so that students' grades are not dependent on the performance of other students from previous years? Several universities around the country are applying a no detriment. Is this something that is completely closed off to ARU?
Okay, thank you for that question. We have considered what our fellow institutions across the UK sector are doing. I think the first thing to say is I wouldn't attach too much to the use of the titles of these policies in terms of safety net and no detriment, because they will differ between different institutions because of the different regulatory frameworks. So just because another institution is calling what they're doing now no detriment doesn't necessarily mean they follow exactly how we applied no detriment last year. Likewise with safety net policy. Actually, the evidence, both from the various networks that we are all part of, from the regulator for the sector, the Office for Students, from the Quality Assurance Agency, which is another part of the framework that looks after HE in the UK, the evidence suggests that the approach that ARU is taking is very similar to the rest of the sector in terms of not applying a system that relates directly to individual student marks, but looking at the scaling process that we've introduced. And indeed, it was having looked at what other institutions do that informed largely how we wanted to take this. The main reason for not having just implemented the previous year policy relates to the fact that we want to ensure that we are using at the same academic level pre-pandemic performance. And that is not possible anymore because the pandemic has continued for as long as it has. And that's why we couldn't simply introduce no detriment as we defined it last year, again this year. So I assure you that we have checked with and looked at what other universities in the UK are doing, and we're confident that we are applying the same types of measures that many other institutions are doing, and which are backed by our regulators. Aletta, do you want to say anything further to that?
Thank you, Paul. No, I can just confirm what you say. We've looked very widely at what other universities and other institutions are doing, and we are really in line. I mean, there is not an awful lot of scope. Actually, there's a kind of a fairly set range of mechanisms that universities can do. And some have used scaling earlier and other mechanisms later, and so on and so forth. We're absolutely in line, and we are very careful to be in line with the rest of the sector, because it is really critical for us and for you that we are clear about how your degree holds its value. I noted that there's a question later on down the screen on whether employers will recognise the value of the work that you are doing. So for employers, for us as an institution, and for you as individual students, it's really critical that you can walk out of the university and say, I have achieved these marks, and the marks that I have got are fair marks in the context of this pandemic. And it's that which will allow you to be clear that your degree holds its value. It is no less value as a result of the fact that it's been achieved during the pandemic. So that makes it absolutely critical, as I say, for us to be in line with the rest of the sector. And we are. And I would just reiterate the point that Paul has made, namely that people call things many different things. So, you know, we had a very specific definition of what we meant by no detriment in the previous academic year. Other universities use no detriment in a very different way, as a sort of a catch-all term, and that's why we shifted this time to talk about a safety net policy, because we wanted to be clear to our students that there are certain changes and nuances which we think are important to understand. So the sensitivity to terminology here, I'm afraid it's really complicated, but that is really critical, that we understand that institutions call different mechanisms that they use very different things. In aggregate, I think we are very well aligned with the sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Aletta and Paul, for clearing things. Next question is, how does the safety net policy apply to those doing final projects or dissertations, since this is a dedicated module, but everyone's project will be distinct?
Yes, thank you. Well, firstly, it does apply to major project modules. We haven't left them out, and I take the point that major projects are individual to the student, but by definition, on the same course and in the same area, they will be linked by the subject area and by the discipline. They will be linked by the subject expertise and the supervision that students receive from my academic colleagues. So on that basis, we will compare how the module performs overall for all major projects with how it has performed historically. So on reflection and having considered this in detail, we believe that it is still appropriate to apply to major projects, and that is what we will be doing.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that. I seem to have missed certain questions. Yeah, it says, how are students' previous results a fair representation of what we can do as an individual student?
Okay, thank you. Well, the logic of the position is using evidence to provide assurance to us whether or not there has been an impact of performance in trimester 2 and trimester 3. There will be, I'm sure, incidences where the impact on mean performance is little or none at all, that students perform better in trimester 2 this year than the counterparts have done in previous years when we've looked at that. So that is why we've gone down that route, because we think it's important that it's an evidence-based system and that we can make sure that we are comparing with equivalent performance at the same module, at the same level, pre-pandemic times. We wanted our approach to be based on evidence as opposed to theory or prediction, because that becomes very much more difficult to justify, both in terms of what we're doing, but also in terms of maintaining the value and integrity of awards. So yes, we will be using evidence base from previous periods, because that is the best way to inform us whether or not there has been an impact at an individual module level.
Thank you, Paul. Moving on to the next question. What happens if there has been students in the past who have previously been capped at 40% due to an academic offence? Will their mark drag the average down?
Thank you. The marks we will be considering will be for the primary initial attempt at the module. So therefore, any capping that will have been applied, any non-submissions do not get included in the calculation of the mean mark. We will be looking at the mean mark of the actual performance of students who submitted in the past. So you do not need to worry how a capped mark, which is a regulatory device that is applied, that won't be taken into account. We'll be looking at the actual marks students have achieved.
Thank you for that. Next, moving on to the next question. It says, please can we get an exact explanation as to why fair assessment will not be applied to first trimester when it was specifically stated in the first safety net policy that all our modules had been affected by coronavirus?
Okay, well, as I mentioned early on, the policy in itself has been designed to take particular account of the current national lockdown that was announced early in January, and also the conditions that has brought on in terms of no longer allowing face-to-face teaching, except in some very restricted examples, and the impact that has had, also bearing in mind with the schools closure, that people will have had, for example, responsibilities for caring, for homeschooling, that didn't exist in trimester 1 when schools were open, etc. And we weren't in a national lockdown. So the SNP is trying to address the circumstances that came from that lockdown announced in early January. The assessment of students for trimester 1 concluded before Christmas, when those circumstances weren't in place. We did, of course, still have the exceptional circumstances processes, and students can still submit requests for late exceptional circumstances claims if they feel there is a scenario that needs to be considered for trimester 1. And of course, there were extensions available at the time, and we did have a good number of students request and secure extensions. So that is the differentiation between trimester 1 and trimester 2, and why the safety net policy comes in from trimester 2. I don't know if my colleagues want to add anything to that, but that's the differentiation.
Thank you very much, Paul. The next question is from Kyle. He says, apologies if this is not seen as applicable. However, examination were covered in the update email on the computer science course. We have been given examinations through the Proctorio software, which many students find to be an uncomfortable experience. It is stated in the email that PSRB accreditation requires us to take an exam. Why is this the case for this year, while the last year group was given extra coursework?
Okay, thank you. That's a really important question. And first thing to me to say is that we have been in discussion with professional bodies about what they require to continue to secure accreditation, and their approach will be the same across the UK sector. They won't be making different distinctions between different providers. There are some differences between what happened last trimester too. That's right, and I think we have to put that down to the fact that the sudden and enforced nature of the lockdown in March last year, which was 3/4 of the way through the teaching trimester 2, and therefore across the sector there were changes that were made, discussed with the professional bodies, where it would have been too late at that stage to make the different arrangements in terms of proctoring examinations as we're doing at the moment. So professional bodies did agree to alternative assessments, and just to reassure you, there were 1 or 2 professional bodies with whom conversations were very lengthy and prolonged, as they wanted to assure themselves of what all institutions were doing. So I think the circumstances to a professional body's a response to this will have progressed, will have advanced this year, because the lockdown didn't occur more or less at the end of the teaching period, where we had to make immediate decisions. It was known earlier on, and therefore they've had more time to reflect both on their experience of what happened in the last 12 months, as well as what we could reasonably do in the new trimester, bearing in mind that the lockdown was introduced earlier in the context of when the trimester takes place. These discussions with professional bodies are very detailed, and the proctoring of examinations that we use in the AIU, we are only using where a professional body has said that they are insistent that an examination of some form or other takes place in order to secure that accreditation. We don't want to put at risk the accreditation of any of our professionally related courses for obvious reasons, and therefore after those discussions with the professional bodies, that's why we've put that facility into place. But we are only using it on those occasions. Wherever there were any other modules with examinations that don't fall into that bracket, they have been replaced, and we are not conducting examinations. I can tell you that the number of examinations for modules that we are conducting by this is in the low 20s. We have not got many examinations, and compared to what we normally do, that is a significant decrease. Hopefully that answers the questions and the complexities that all universities have in managing their relationships with their professional bodies.
Thank you very much, Paul. So moving on to the next question. It says, so if my class on average do better than the previous years, but I'm struggling this year as an individual due to the restrictions, my grade would not be bumped up?
That is correct, insofar that it is the average of the entire delivery of the module that will be considered. In which case I would argue, say to the questioner that that's why there are different strands of the policy available, and that if there are particular circumstances that affected you more because of your own individual circumstances, that's why the exceptional circumstances and or the extension systems are there as well.
Okay, so the next question is, when will we know the previous module average?
At the moment, that is an enormous piece of work that the academic registry is going to start to undertake. We're planning for that at the moment, and then we will, over the next several weeks, start to work that out for every single module. And then, as I said to an earlier question, we will work out how we are going to display this on the student record, so you can see. At the moment, I can assure you that we wish to be transparent about this and show what calculations we have made. Precisely how that's going to be shown, I can't say yet, because we're still having those discussions about how we're going to adapt the IT systems to show it, etc. And in terms of actually calculating the historic mean performance, that's the huge piece of preparatory work that we will be undertaking over the next month or so ahead of the marking process.
Thank you, Paul. So the next question is, how will that affect our individual marks? I'm struggling to understand, if you don't bump the mark to match the mean result individually, how is it scaled up?
Okay, so when we look at we compare the two mean performances, the eventual intended outcome is that we would adjust all marks for all students, all final module marks for all students registered for that module by the appropriate amount to make sure that the mean performance this time round is equal to the mean performance historically. And the amount we will add will be the same to each student. So it won't be different between different students because of the original mark. It will be the same. So it will be +2 to everyone or +4 to everyone, whatever the appropriate amount is, in order for the mean mark this time round to be equal to the historic mean mark. So that's how it will work. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. The next question is, my Dateline in Turnitin has not reflected the additional 6 days. Will it be changed later, or has it already been done?
Okay, it will depend on, of course, when that was amended. I can't obviously specifically answer that question without looking into that particular module at present, you'll appreciate. I would recommend that if you're concerned about that, you speak to the module leader or your module tutor to seek assurance of it. But the eVision record and that will flow through to Canvas will have the revised date. It may well be that the date was put on and the +6 days were added early on, so you would not necessarily have seen the first date and then the revised date. But I would recommend, if you're concerned about it, you speak to the module tutor or the module leader to get assurance. I can't look at that particular circumstance, as people will understand at this moment. If you don't get an answer in that way, then by all means email me and I'll see what I can do to find out that information for you.
Thank you, Paul. We are almost out of time, so we'll have one last question. It says, how to apply for Hardship Fund if we are foreigner? What kind of document do we need to support that?
Thanks, Riya. So the Hardship Fund is available to international students, which at the moment, which it normally wouldn't be, but they're international students who are already in the UK. So you can apply for it, and it depends on what basis you're applying for it. So, for example, if you're applying for hardship because you haven't been able to get employment as you kind of plan to do, then we may ask for some evidence around what you've done in terms of attempting to apply for employment through a supporting statement. There is also, we're asking for a copy of a bank statement at a certain date as well, but we're trying to do minimal, kind of ask you for minimal things in order to apply for this funding.
Thank you very much, Libby, and we're almost out of time, and I'd like to thank everyone for attending today, and we hope that we have answered all your questions. The session will be available on demand later today to watch back, and the link will be displayed on the screen shortly. Don't forget that as part of the election 2021, we have our Question the Candidate event this evening at 5 p.m. If you have a question for the candidates, you can submit it tonight, either on the Teams event or on our Facebook live feed. Thanks to our panel for joining us, and we hope all of you have a fantastic Thursday.